Welcome back, AI curious folk, to AI Ramblings Daily Podcast, number 123. I'm Michael Parekh, your human AI guide, and the week is off to a start with a bang, as usual. Today's theme is setting the stage. Again, more theater ahead in the US-China AI kerfuffles and negotiations. You recall we had the big meeting between President Xi and President Trump in China a few weeks ago. I discussed a lot about the issues back then. They literally had to pick up Jensen Huang at the airport in Alaska, almost a Home Alone scenario. Took him and a whole bunch of US executives there. And now there's a follow-up meeting coming up, of course, between President Xi coming here to the White House September 24th and meeting with the US president. And ahead of that meeting, of course, there's an intense amount of chess game preparation, moves, etc., particularly around AI, around two big issues in particular. Number one is open versus closed AI models and the surrounding issues of distillation around these models. I've written a lot and talked a lot about that in recent days and big Sunday pieces and so on. Again, links in the show notes. And then the other issue is, how does the US compete truly building out AI data centers in the multi-gigawatts with millions of GPUs from Nvidia and others, and do so against China, which has an inherent advantage, not in chips and chip making machines, but in power and being able to use eminent domain more aggressively there than here. And this is the dynamic. It's being set up as a race. I've argued in these pages here and this podcast that it would be better if we worked more cooperatively than as a race, but it is what it is. So I want to go through, as usual, 3 events and go through my usual takes, both individually and overall. Number 1, prep underway, preliminary negotiation, and the positions are being set by various actors, both in China, around China, and here. In China, President Xi just finished up a big AI conference in Shanghai. They had a lot of their big companies and small companies put out their best products. We had the Moonshot AI Kimi K3 model, which with 2.8 trillion parameters goes up right head-to-head, toe-to-toe with the best models, frontier models from our closed OpenAI and Anthropic. OpenAI is 5.6, Anthropic's Fable 5 and Mythos. And we also had Alibaba release their latest and greatest 2.4 trillion parameter model, also around the big Xi conference and keynote. That is the Qwen 3.7 Max. Now, all of these are geeky details, etc., but the posturing overall is the key. China is basically saying, hey, everyone in the world, use our open source models to build around the frontier models that the US is talking about that they are using in a very protective manner, which we are in many cases. And that is an interesting argument for the world, because today in this AI tech wave, the market for US tech is global, unlike the internet wave where yours truly was the head of internet research at Goldman Sachs. Back then, over 70, 80% of the overall market for the internet was in the US, with a little bit in Europe and almost minuscule in China. The world has changed a lot in a few decades. And today, this is a global context, and the US is playing the game like it's all a US context. And that is a position that sets us up more for failure than success. And I'm going to go through why in terms of the next 2 events I want to talk about. The key companies on AI side, both in the US and in Europe, are posturing themselves around these issues. In the US, the big chess moves that are being played are OpenAI and Anthropic, basically arguing in every which way they can that the better position for the US is to somehow restrict the China OpenAI models, the open models, and to protect ourselves from China's open source models because they're less safe or they're geopolitically will put us behind in the race. It couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, in the last few months, as I've documented in several pieces, etc., it's not just Nvidia and Tesla, which is Elon, of course, and Apple that has big vested interests in in China. Now we have Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, all are going to the White House and saying, "Hey, we actually would be supportive of being able to use and work with more Chinese companies, AI models from China that are open source, etc., because it allows us to give customers a wider set of choices, not just US customers, global customers, and recognize that most US customers, our biggest companies across almost every industry imaginable, are global companies. They need the flexibility of having multiple, as many models as possible, not just the big, large models, but the small models, open source, closed source, and all the tools. It's not just the models, it's all the harnesses and all the other applications and all of the other pieces of the technology that are just being thought about and invented and built out at scale. To have constraining policies around open versus closed in the US versus China is a policy that is against our best long-term interests, but the political forces are very aggressively at work to position their pieces correctly ahead of the big meeting in September and beyond. So that's the second one. Again, a lot of details with specific articles around this. If you want to go through some of the details about the strong words being spoken by every side in the positioning and the prepositioning and repositioning that's going on. The third thing I want to talk about related to all this is the regulatory fight that is underway, both on the open and closed models that we've already talked about, but also in terms of data center buildouts. I had a podcast just earlier this week on that issue. The new event today I wanted to touch on is Senator, the leading Democratic senator is proposing. This is Mark Warner on the Democratic side proposing an AI bill that is trying to be a bipartisan approach to regulating the build out of AI data centers in the US. I talked yesterday about how Elon Musk's adventure of building out his closest 1 and 2 AI data centers in Memphis became a catalyst for a nationwide set of headwinds around AI data centers in general, around the use of water, around the use of power before the meter, after the meter, all those kinds of issues. And of course, a political issue of football ahead of the midterm elections in terms of rising utility prices on top of everything else, when these AI data centers are having a direct and perhaps indirect impact on electric power prices. So that is the third thing I want to talk about. My overall take on all this is again, both these issues, the open and closed and the distillation issues and the AI data center issues, are just setting up the theater, as it were, for the next set of negotiations, both at the level of the two countries, US and China, but also positioning across parties in the US at the federal, state, and local level. I also wanted to take a moment and talk about the distillation charge, which is related to the US-China kerfuffle that's going on. And there is a position being taken by the Anthropics and the OpenAIs that distillation is somehow stealing by the Chinese, unfair and terrible. Recognize that distillation, and I've written a lot about this, is just a technique that's been as old as the AI large language models in the first place. The very first models were basically trained on all the data that we've all put on the internet over the last few decades. So they distilled all the data that we put up on there, and they've created the first GPT 1, 2, 3, and Anthropics models. So for them to, and then they went on, I'm talking about those two companies, went on to distill each other's models. OpenAI, you can look it up, I'll have it in the show notes, distilled YouTube's videos from Google to train their models around multimodal capabilities. So the US companies have been using these techniques against each other from the very beginning over the last few years, and to use that distillation charge as a stealing charge against the China's models is a theatrical technique to gain political advantage. And I wanted to be clear on that. There's a lot of technical detail here that people can debate until the sun goes down, but we can actually go through this in a factual, detailed way if people are so interested. So recognize that right now we are in the theatrical stage ahead of preparation for the next set of negotiations, both between the US and China, and of course, all the federal, state, and local interests here across two parties ahead of our midterm elections. So that is the political grand setting for the set of theater that's being set up and the political footballs that are being brought out, of course, right after a very exciting World Cup. So hopefully you find some of these discussions interesting and thought-provoking. Let's move to the Gadget AI section. Now let's talk about the biggest movie hit in recent memory, which is, of course, The Odyssey, which is Christopher Nolan, the iconic director, who has been a big fan of the IMAX technology. This is the big screen television, the movie technology that was introduced to the world in 1971, but didn't go mainstream in the US until 2008 with all the theaters and digital projection systems and so on. I'll have a lot of these details in the show notes. So IMAX has been around for decades. And of course, the last few years, people have been staying home, watching streaming, etc. But the Odyssey has had a huge blockbuster opening, over $250 million. And everyone is wanting to see this movie in IMAX for the full effect. The reviews are raving, and the IMAX theaters across the country are sold out for days and weeks ahead. So yours truly has not seen The Odyssey. I've seen all the reviews, etc. And I'm looking forward to getting my IMAX tickets on this. And I just wanted to highlight this as a Gadget AI thing, because here's a technology that's been around for decades. And Marshall McLuhan famously said the medium is the message, but oftentimes a new message remakes the medium, in this case, the IMAX theaters themselves. Now, all of a sudden, it's a shot in the arm for the industry to go back to a technology that they've had forever. It was essentially reinvented by the IMAX companies with their cameras for Christopher Nolan, because he needed specialized, custom-built IMAX cameras that were more soundproof. The actors had to work around these cameras. If you're a movie nerd like yours truly and a technology nerd, the way they did this movie is actually very, very interesting. Very little CGI, computer graphics, all like casts of hundreds and thousands in all the major scenes with these cameras. And so it's exciting to see an old technology get a new jolt, as it were, through a new movie that is extraordinarily custom made using those technologies for viewers everywhere. So it's interesting to see that. And I wanted to highlight that. The other thing I wanted to highlight is it echoed for me a technology that I raved about, and I'll have the link in the show notes, of the Apple Vision Pro, which was introduced 2 or 3 years ago. It's been basically now almost forgotten because it was a $3,400 item, and it's not been that successful. But I said back then, and I'm saying it again today, the IMAX experience at home is available, in a manner of speaking, through the Vision Pro. And I often watch almost every movie, show, podcast, etc. through the Vision Pro, and I love it. So I wanted to highlight that while you're waiting to go watch The Odyssey at your local IMAX theater, the Vision Pro is a second best, although expensive, again, another medium to watch these messages. Which takes us to the Q&A today. One question I've had around this is, what's my biggest wow moment watching a movie with the Vision Pro? And I'll repeat this. It's, whatever you watch, the experience of watching on a huge screen in front of you is still a wow experience, whether it's in the IMAX theater or at home with these big things on your head, a computer and a display on your head. So that remains the wow factor even today. I just watched another favorite movie of mine, Jaws, actually, on the Vision Pro, and it was a visceral experience, both with the video and the sound. through the Vision Pro's spatial capabilities, etc. The second question, what is my biggest issue with the Vision Pro? Of course, it's the fact that you've got a computer on your head with big displays and so on. So little on the heavy side, not always comfortable, but all the more excuse to take a couple of breaks, refill your beverage, and go back to your movie, mini intermissions, as it were. So an issue that can be dealt with, but that would be the so-called biggest issue until we see the bigger, more capable glasses, the smart glasses that I've written a lot about, finally come and make a useful, more comfortable alternative against the Vision Pro type of glasses. So that is our show today. Let me also highlight our AI Reset to Zero piece 1154 today, which is AMD's Helios system now just being introduced this week against Nvidia's Vera Rubin AI architecture. It's a new, very interesting competitor. It'll take a few points of share potentially, but the market overall is growing for everybody around the world because of the shortage of AI GPU data center infrastructure. So an interesting piece, I think, for those who are interested in Nvidia's position and market share. They have over 95% of AI GPU market out there, but AMD is now a new credible partner with big customers like Microsoft, Meta, and others who are using their Helios technology in some of their data centers. So do take a look at that if interested. Tomorrow we'll be back, of course, with AI Ramblings 124 and Reset to Zero 1155. I want to thank you as usual for joining us today, AI Curious Folk. Stay tuned.